This is part 5 of a series where we've been looking at words in the original biblical languages that have been translated and understood to refer to hell. And as we've been looking at these words in their original context, we've been seeing that the Bible doesn't teach about hell. It doesn't teach about some underworld where conscious souls are suffering in torment forever and ever, endlessly and eternally. That is not what the Bible teaches, and that's what we've been seeing throughout this series. And we're going to continue. In 2 Peter 2 and verse 4, there is another word that comes from the word Tartarus. It is also translated here in the New King James Version as hell. What is this referring to? Let's read the passage. For if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved for judgment. Well, let's take a look. So the word used here is tartaru. It's actually a verb. And again, the definition to cast into hell is provided here. And that definition does line up with the Greek understanding. But again, we are not dealing with Greek thinkers when we are reading the Bible. Usage, I thrust down to Tartarus or Gehenna. Now, you see how they put Gehenna there? Again, I have already shown that Gehenna is not referring to some underworld of eternal torment, but referring to the fiery judgment of God. But let's continue here. From Tartarus, Greek name for the abode of the damned. So that's what the word means. But is that what the Bible author, is that what Peter had in mind? No. Peter came from a Jewish background and he was a Christian. And as a Jewish believer, he did not have that in mind, but he was writing to Greeks, and that was the word, or he was writing to people who spoke Greek and wanted the message to spread far and wide with this popular language, and so that was the word that was used. According to the Adventist commentary, a rendering of the one Greek word tartaru, to hold captive in Tartarus. The ancient Greeks considered Tartarus to be the abode of the wicked dead, and the place where punishment was meted out to them. It thus corresponded to Gehenna of the Jews. Peter used familiar language of this Hellenized audience. Peter used familiar language for this Hellenized audience, but not accepting Greek mythological views of the afterlife. Here, Tartarus refers simply to the place of abode to which the evil angels are restricted until the day of judgment. Now, where are they? Where are they restricted? Where are they restricted? Well, they're here on earth. And they have been restricted. They no longer have their divine original office. They are no longer ministering spirits. They've lost their purpose. They were cast out. And they live an empty and miserable existence. And they are bound for destruction. 2 Peter 2:4. As we have already read, for if God did not spare his angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness. So this is referring to the chains of circumstance that they are in, to be reserved for fire. Again, Peter is using a word poetically, in a sense, Tartaru, to cast into Tartarus, using a language familiar to a Hellenized audience, but not accepting the mythological point of view of the Greeks, but using that word to point out that these angels are in a chain of circumstance. They are headed for judgment. Now, in Revelation 20, 1 and 2, we also read of another chain of circumstance where it says, "And I saw an angel coming down from heaven having the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. He laid hold of the dragon, that serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years." Now that is the chain of circumstance. Why? Why? Because as we read Revelation, and I'm going to read a little bit more in there. Revelation chapter 20, and it tells us here, I'm continuing in verse number 3, "And cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him." Now, where is that bottomless pit? Where is that bottomless pit? That bottomless pit is this earth. As I had studied in my presentations on 26 and 27, we learned, those of you who followed, that this earth will be desolate. Jesus will come again. He will receive the saints. The wicked will be put to death when he comes in that flame of fire. And this earth will be completely desolate. This earth is that bottomless pit. And Satan is in a chain of circumstance for the 1,000 years when this earth is desolate. But after the 1,000 years, the wicked dead resurrect. And Jesus comes back to this earth with the saints and the New Jerusalem. Why was Satan chained for 1,000 years? It was the chain of circumstance. But once the 1,000 years are over and the wicked are there, he's no longer chained, in that evil must have something to corrupt. Evil must have something to corrupt. Evil must have mischief to do. And if wickedness is not doing wickedness, it is restrained. And so Satan was restrained when there was no one there to deceive. But when the 1,000 years are over, then his chain was lifted, in that his circumstance changed. So I'm going to read here again, verse 3, "And cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more," because all of the nations were gone. They were destroyed. "Till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that, he must be loosed a little season." What would happen in that little season? Well, John, the prophet who wrote Revelation, continues, verse 4, "And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their forehead or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years." So when Jesus comes again, and the victorious saints are taken up with Christ, they're going to live and reign with Christ for 1,000 years. But this earth will be desolated, because those who are not with Christ, those who did not accept Christ, are going to be destroyed. And so the earth will be desolate for 1,000 years. But verse 5 says, "But the rest of the dead did not live." The rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. So when the 1,000 years are finished, then the wicked dead would live again for a short while. Now, this is the first resurrection. In other words, the resurrection of the righteous who lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. That was the first resurrection. But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. The Bible is very clear of the first resurrection is for the righteous. It goes on to say, "Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death has no power." So all of the righteous who live and reign with Christ for 1,000 years, they're good. There's no trouble for them any longer. Second death has no power. But they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. Verse number 7 says, when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan will be loosed out of his prison. Why? As we saw in verse number 3, he couldn't deceive anyone. He couldn't deceive the nations, because the nations were destroyed. The wicked were defeated. The earth was desolate. So he couldn't deceive anyone for that 1,000 years. But then we read that when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan will be loosed out of his prison. Loosed in what way? He will be able to deceive. Why? Because the wicked would live. The wicked would be resurrected after the 1,000 years. And so it says in verse 8, "And he shall go to deceive the nations," yes, which have been resurrected, the wicked, in other words, which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog. And so Gog and Magog, referred to in the Old Testament book of Ezekiel, are used here to typify the enemies of God. And so Satan is going to make this one last attempt to deceive and to lead the wicked dead to attack the people of God who have come down and come back to this earth after the 1,000 years. As Christ came back after the 1,000 years to this earth, the wicked dead were also resurrected after the 1,000 years. And so Satan wants to gather the wicked together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And then verse 9 says, "They went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them." So Satan was in a chain of circumstance for that 1,000 years between the first and second resurrection, between the resurrection of the righteous and the resurrection of the wicked, between the ascension of the righteous and the resurrection of the wicked, and the descending of the righteous after the 1,000 years. And these are things that I've spoken about in my presentation on the millennium and the end of sin, presentation 27. So what about hell? What about the abyss? The Bible speaks of the abyss. We see it, for example, in Luke 8:30 and 31. The abyss. What about the abyss? This is interesting. Some people might say, well, maybe that's hell. Maybe it's the abyss. Luke 8:30 and 31, Jesus asked him, saying, "What is your name?" Now, this is a very important passage to understand the abyss. Here we see the context here is dealing with a man possessed by demons. And Jesus asked him, saying, "What is your name?" And he said, "Legion." Because many demons had entered him. Now, clearly from that, these supernatural demons experience space and time differently than us. If an entire legion can enter into a person, clearly they experience space and time different than us. It goes on to say, and they begged Jesus that he would not command them to go out into the abyss. It goes on to tell us in verse 32, now a herd of many swine was feeding there on the mountain. So they begged him that he would permit them to enter them. And he permitted them. So clearly, they perceived the abyss as being outside of a living being. So when they were outside of a living being, they were within a person, and they were a legion of them within a person. And so they wanted to go into something else. They wanted to go into the swine. So for them, as long as they were inhabiting a living thing, they were not experiencing the abyss. So where is the abyss? The abyss is their experience of this earth. Their experience of this earth. That's why they said, that's why they begged Jesus that he would permit them to enter into the swine. And he permitted them. Because their experience of this earth, as long as they were not dwelling within someone or something, even swine, they were in the abyss. The abyss is their experience of this earth. When they weren't inhabiting someone. For the demons, the earth is as empty as before it was formed. For the demons, this earth is as empty as before it was formed. And they are supernatural beings. They are supernatural beings. But they experience time and space differently. And so what is that abyss? That is their experience of this earth. Now, Strong's Concordance, abusos is the Greek word. Definition given here, boundless, bottomless, the abyss, unfathomable depth, and especially Jewish conception. Now here it says, the home of the dead and of evil spirits. Again, the home of the dead and of evil spirits. Again, it depends. Now, even with that definition, it depends, or with that usage, it depends what that means. Well, in one sense, this earth is the home of evil spirits. They're on this earth. Yes. In one sense, this is their home, but they experience it as an abyss. They experience as a vast, empty place. They live to torment. They live to do harm. And when they're not doing harm, they are miserable. Either way, they're miserable. I kind of liken it to a drug addict. Somebody who's a drug addict or, addicted to some kind of substance. They feel, when they're using the substance, they feel as though they are happy. But it's not a true happiness. And when they're not using it, they feel miserable until they could get their next high. And so in a sense, these demons are like addicts. Now, a human addict, if he hasn't reached or she hasn't reached the point of no return, can repent and turn away and be freed from that lifestyle. But when they're in that lifestyle of addiction, they are in a chain of circumstance as well. But these demons are in the chain of circumstance. They're on this earth. They are wandering here, and they experience it as an abyss. Just as those demons that were inhabiting that man. They did not want to experience the abyss. They did not want to be sent in the abyss. That's why they said they wanted to go into the swine. Now, these are a number of passages where the word abyss is used. And so the word is referring to, as it says here, and this does actually line up very well. Again, we have to allow the Bible to interpret itself, but this idea of a boundless or bottomless or unfathomable depth, that does line up with the way that word is used in the Bible. Now, in the Septuagint, the LXX, or the Greek version of the Old Testament, in Genesis 1:2, which reads in the New King James Version, "The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters." The abyss stands for the Hebrew tehom. So in the Greek version, it is abusos. But in the Hebrew, it is tehom. So tehom is translated into English as deep. So this abyss is referring to, or tehom is referring to the deep depths. Boundlessness. And in the context of how the fallen angels experience this world, they experience this world as this vast, empty wasteland. They don't have any appreciation for creation, and unless they're doing wickedness, they experience this earth as this vast depth and wasteland. That is their experience of this earth. In Job 28:14, it says, "The deep says, it is not in me. The sea says, it is not with me." So the deep is there, tehom, the Hebrew word. And the Greek version of that word, abusos. And so when we look in the book of Genesis 1:2, before the earth was formed, the earth was without form and void. Darkness was on the face of the deep, the tehom, which is the abyss. This vast shapelessness, this emptiness, this depth. Deep, sea, abyss. So this is not referring, once again, it is not referring to some place where the souls of human beings go. People die and they go to this dimension of eternal torment. In the case of the fallen angels, this earth is their place of torment. In the case of the demons, this earth is the abyss. This earth is the emptiness, and it relates to the emptiness and the void of their own experience. Their existence is a miserable void, and they experience the earth in that way. They experience the earth in that way, and unless they are deceiving, or unless they are hurting, or unless they are doing something or possessing someone, or even in the case of Luke chapter 8, possessing swine, they experience this earth as the abyss. And this earth is holding them until their final destruction. Now Romans 10:7 uses the word abusos here as well. Deep. The deep. It is used to describe the place of the dead, particularly with reference to Christ's death. Abusos is translated as bottomless pit. Used as an adjective in classical Greek, the word means bottomless, boundless. When used with reference to intelligent beings, abusos seems to imply isolation from other beings and the inability to escape from the situation, as of a man in death or confined alone in the dungeon. And so when it comes to Christ now, that Christ, according to what we read here, and let me read in the New King James Version, I'll read again, my preferred translation. It says, or who will descend into the abyss? That is to bring Christ up from the dead. So here the abyss is referring to death. This place of emptiness, this void, emptiness, the depths, bottomless, endless. But praise the Lord, Jesus rose from the dead. He rose from the dead. He conquered the abyss. He conquered the grave. And so we have to take the word abyss and keep it in context, because as I said, when we think of the abyss in Genesis, going back there, Genesis 1:2, the tehom or the abusos in the Septuagint, the abyss here, it's referring to the deep of the earth, of the formless earth, the depth of this formless earth before God had formed it. The earth was without form and void. Darkness was on the face of the deep. So you have to keep that in context. In the case of Job 28:14, the deep says, it is not in me. The sea says, it is not with me. So there's this connection made with the deep parts of the earth. In the case of the fallen angels, in Luke 8, what we were looking at earlier, it was referring to their experience of this earth as this formless and empty place, because they have a formless and empty existence. And in the case of Christ, it is referring to the place of the dead. Where is the bottomless pit? Where is the bottomless pit? Again, looking at Revelation 20:1-3, then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. Okay, so what is that bottomless pit? Again, that bottomless pit is this earth, this formless earth, when all human beings are either removed to heaven or destroyed here on earth, and the earth is desolate. This earth becomes the bottomless pit for Satan. He laid hold of the dragon, that serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit. That was the situation he was in here on this earth, clearly, as the context reveals, as I went over before, and shut him up, and set a seal on him, that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years were finished. Yes, when he was on this earth and there was no human beings here, this earth was destroyed and desolate. That was his experience here. He couldn't deceive anyone until after the 1,000 years, when the wicked resurrected. And then he could deceive once again, as the Bible continues to tell us as we read this chapter. The bottomless pit for the fallen angels, for Satan, is the earth when they are without souls to torment. That is their experience of this earth. Revelation 12:13. Now when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. When the evil angels have no one to torment, see, as soon as they get the opportunity, they want to torment, they want to attack. But when the evil angels have no one to torment, they are in the abyss. They're experiencing the empty. In other words, they're experiencing the emptiness of their own experience. They are left with themselves. And they experience their own misery. The truth is, that if someone is an addict of some kind and they are in that chain of addiction and they are struggling with that addiction, even when they are using the narcotic or the substance to which they are addicted to, they are still living a miserable experience. They just kind of forget that for a while through this means of self-abuse. But they are still living a miserable existence, and they are still suffering. And so it is with these evil angels. When they're tormenting someone, when they're possessing someone, when they are harming someone, they may forget their misery. They may forget the ugliness and emptiness of their own experience, but they still are living an ugly and empty experience. They are still experiencing, they're still in the abyss, but they're not experiencing it. So looking again, Luke 8:30 and 31, Jesus asked him, saying, "What is your name?" And he said, "Legion," because many demons had entered him. Again, these are supernatural beings. They experience this earth differently for a whole legion to inhabit a person. And they begged him that he would not command them to go out into the abyss. So the abyss is the world, as they experience it when they are not doing wickedness. Because they hate everything, and they even hate themselves. And they live an empty experience. And anytime they can be reminded of their own ugliness, they are experiencing their own torment. But when they go and inhabit something else, somehow it seems to bring them a wicked form of pleasure, perhaps making them forget their own miserable existence. And yet, they're still living a miserable existence, but perhaps they are deceiving themselves for a while, since that's all they're about, deception and self-deception as well. So in summary, hell or Sheol is referring to the grave, the place where the dead sleep. They go in the ground, they sleep until the resurrection. The dead know nothing, and again, my presentation on Belief 26 goes into more detail on that. The abyss, the situation of isolation, emptiness, the experience of godlessness in the case of the fallen angels, and separation from God, hopelessness. Gehenna, a reference to the judgment of God. None of this points to an eternal burning underworld of endless punishment. Hell is not in the Bible. Yes, you open the Bible and you see the English translation, that word hell, but hell, the meaning that hell has, the meaning is not biblical. And so that's what I mean when I say hell is not in the Bible. Yes, if you open an English Bible, you'll see the word hell is there, but really, it shouldn't be there. Or if it is there and perhaps the meaning can be updated, that would be a different thing. But as far as I know, the common understanding of that word hell is this burning underworld of endless punishment. And that is not biblical. And that's why I say hell is not in the Bible. Is that idea of hell in the Bible? Yes, the word, as I said, is in the Bible in the English translations, but it's not actually a biblical idea. I don't even think the word should be used. I don't think translators should have used that word, at least because of the understanding of what that word means. No, hell is not in the Bible. Yes, there is a fiery judgment where the fire comes from God and the wicked are destroyed, but there is not some eternal fire, punishment, suffering, endless suffering for the wicked. They will be destroyed by the fire that comes from God, and it'll happen on this earth, and then the earth will be made new. God bless.